Alrighty. Well, um, uh, I'm on my. We just got back. Rocky and I did. I took Rocky over to have his leg bandaged up again. So that's all done. He'll be good now for a couple of days. Um, uh, but I was thinking of something. Now, as you all know, if you followed me and watched my videos, I'm pretty critical of the government of Canada, and I'm pretty critical of the whole thing, really, of Canada in general. And I've also been pretty outspoken about how our rights are being taken from us here, and I believe that they, in fact, are being taken from us, and I don't like it, and I don't like the government for doing it, and I still feel that way. But I have been thinking about something though, and about the difference between the Canadian Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. In the U.S. Constitution, the rights are guaranteed by God. They're considered God-given rights. So you have a right, say to God-given. You have a God-given right, say, to free speech in the United States. In Canada, the way our law is written, we have a right to self-expression within reasonable limits. And our whole Constitution is like that. It's very wishy-washy. It's very, oh, how would I put it? It's very non-committal, I guess you could say. Everything is subject to interpretation. Everything is worded in such a way that it doesn't really mean anything. It has a meaning, but it doesn't. And then who decides? Who decides what within reasonable limits are? Because what I think is reasonable, you may not think is reasonable. You know? Or we might agree on what's reasonable, but that guy over there, he might disagree. He might think that some other thing is reasonable. And so, who decides? I mean, a lot of the time it gets decided in the courts when cases actually come into the courts. When somebody's, disputing something the government has done. When somebody's faced some criminal charge that they don't believe they should have had to face, or, there's been something done to them, something put against them by the government or whatever. Maybe they've had property seized, or they've had money seized, or they've had some restrictions placed on their freedom or whatever. Then they contest it. It goes to court, and then a judge interprets what within reasonable limits means, or whatever wishy-washy phrase is used, and then that sets a precedent, and that becomes case law. That's kind of how we do it here, and then that's used to determine the outcome of cases in the future. That seems to be how we do it here. So somebody with deep enough pockets, though, to go through that process has to then they have to then appeal everything and hope that they win, basically. Throw a lot of money at it and hope they win. Of course, as a result, not many of those people find themselves charged or restricted or deprived of property or whatever. It's the people who can't afford to fight who get charged, and deprived of property and so on. And so it's a kind of a wishy-washy constitution. Now, in the United States, people have their rights violated too. It happens all the time. And if you can't afford to defend your rights, then you really, in practice, you don't really have them. At least not in the way that somebody who can afford to defend them does. But at least the Constitution says these are God-given rights. So if they're God-given, only God can take them away. And also, it's very direct. There isn't a lot of wishy-washy stuff in there. It's very direct. It's like, you have a God-given right to do such and such. You have a God-given right to bear arms. You have a God-given right to security of your person. You have a God-given right to be protected against, unlawful search and seizure and so on, and these are enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. Here, we have rights granted to us by the Crown. But here's the thing, though. If the Crown has granted you your rights, like under the U.S. Constitution, they say God, it's a God-given right. This is a God-given right. That is a God-given right. Well, if God gave it, then only God can take it away, you see. But here it's the Crown. You have rights granted to you by the Crown. Well, if our rights are granted to us by the Crown, then I suppose it could be argued that the Crown has a right to deprive us of our rights. And it pains me to admit that. And I still think it's a douchebag thing to do, to deprive the people of their rights, and I don't like the government of Canada for doing it, because I do see them doing it more and more all the time. But I can't actually argue that they don't have a right to do it. Because if our rights come from the Crown, well, the Crown is the government, basically. So if our rights are granted to us by the Crown, then the Crown has a right to take them away. We can be deprived of our rights by the Crown. And that's kind of a scary thing. And I don't like it. But whether I like it or not, that's the reality of the situation. The government of Canada actually has a right to seize our property, to seize our bank accounts, to seize our bodies and throw us into jail or anywhere else they want to put us, to order us not to speak about certain things, and punish us if we do, and all the rest of it, because they're the ones who granted us the rights not to have those things done to us. So if they decide they're going to revoke all that, they have a right to do it. No, they don't have a moral right to do it, but they have a legal right. And see, that this is the problem. It's like, under our Constitution, our rights come from the Crown, not from God. So there is no higher authority than God. So if God grants you your rights, there's nobody above God that can take them away. If the Crown grants your rights, well, really, the only one above the Crown is God. But God didn't grant you your rights, the Crown did. So they can take them away. See, this is what's happened. That's how our Constitution is here. And so we have this wishy-washy Constitution that actually gives the government the right to claw back all our rights. Basically, we don't have rights, we have privileges. We have the privilege of owning stuff. We have the privilege of not being, put in prison unlawfully, not having our goods seized unlawfully, being allowed to speak our minds, and so on. At least we've had those privileges. Now the government has taken them away. But again, if they granted them, they can take them away. And that's a sad thing, because that's what we're seeing happening now. So I don't know. I mean, I wish it wasn't that way, but it is. At least as far as I can tell, it is. Because they grant, under our Constitution, our rights come from the Crown, not from God. Now, I do believe that we have God-given rights. In a spiritual sense, we do. And I believe that God will judge those who try to take those away, because God is still in charge. So when the government of Canada does some of the dirty things it's been doing lately, I have no doubt that God has taken note of that, and that at some point there will be a settling of accounts for it. But from a strictly legal point of view, it looks like our government has a right to do whatever it wants to do to us. That's quite a thing when you think about it. I remember years ago, before we had the Constitution, because the Constitution was ratified in 1982, so I'm going back prior to that. But I remember years prior to that, my dad telling me that in Canada you have no rights. And I was a kid at the time, and I thought that was a strange thing for him to say, that we have no rights, you know. I knew there was something wrong with the world in general, but I didn't really think that we didn't have rights. But my dad, he told me, in Canada you don't have any rights. You know, you have whatever rights, what he said is, you have whatever rights the powers that be tell you you have. That's how it is here. And it turns out he was absolutely right. Now, that was prior to the Constitution being ratified, but even after 1982, when the Constitution was in, the same situation still applied because of the Constitution being as wishy-washy as it is. You know, it is what it is, I guess, eh? Anyway, I'm still going to speak out. I'm still going to wherever the government says I can or not. But I will acknowledge that the government has a right to order me not to. I'm just going to be disobedient. That's all. You know. Because that's just how I'll be. You know. They'll be how they'll be. I'll be how I'll be. Anyway, that's it. It's just a different take on a situation, you know, that we're dealing with here in this country. You know, I think from a strictly legalistic point of view, those of us who are claiming we have rights don't have a leg to stand on. I hope I'm wrong. And I'm not a lawyer. This isn't legal advice or anything. This is just me looking at how our Constitution is worded and thinking, it does not look like we have any God-given rights, really. We have rights granted to us by the Crown. And, you know what the Crown takes, what the Crown gives, the Crown can taketh away, you know. Anyway, Rocky was not happy about his leg. He was not happy at all about it. But, you know what? It's all bandaged up now. It's good. It's healing really well. The wound is almost completely closed now after, well, about 3 years. Because it happened in 2022, so 3 years. It's finally closed, almost completely closed up anyway, so that's a good thing. Anyway, I'll keep you all updated on the Rocky situation on his leg and so on. Let you know what's happening there. And that's it. We'll see you later.